Alex here with a high conflict child custody video on custody evaluators. Like parenting coordinators, I don't have any personal experience with custody evaluators. So all I can really cover in this video is some of the general overarching legal principles that seem to surround them. This is the same thing that I did with parenting coordinators, and I found out a lot of interesting things with those. Like specifically, the fact that the Supreme Court saw them as a potential barrier to a person's constitutional right to court access, and how that required the court to strictly control what kind of powers the parenting coordinator had, and also that the parents could just flat out veto a parenting coordinator in the first place and just refuse to allow one on the case. Custody evaluators, you can't really do that, but those are just some of the examples of the things I talked about with parenting coordinators. Custody evaluators aren't there to coordinate between the parents and help the parents with decisions. Instead, custody evaluators are there to help the court make a decision. Custody evaluators, from what it seems to me, they're independent witnesses, expert witnesses, that are there for the children. They're there to help the court figure out what's in the best interest of the children. Both parties pay the custody evaluator. It's not like with an ordinary expert witness where one party hires them and that expert witness will testify on their behalf. Instead, both parties have to pay the expert witness, the custody evaluator, and the custody evaluator ultimately works for the children. They don't work for either party. In Nevada, in 2015, a statute was passed allowing the court the discretion to determine how they wanted to have parents pay for the fees of any experts at all. So in Nevada, it's going to be a thing where if even one parent can afford the parenting coordinator and the other parent can't, you're still going to have a situation where the court can say this one parent needs to pay for the entire price. Other situations where both parents make relatively the same amount of income, I imagine the court will just order the parents to split the cost 50-50. But what I wanted to get at with this is we have a statute that makes it so that unless both parents can't afford the custody evaluator, the court is within its power to order one. I covered this statute as well in another video called Attorney Fee Equalizers, but in that video I just talk about the attorney fee aspect of the statute, which basically says that the court can order attorney fees apportioned between the parties at its discretion. So same exact thing there. It appears to be some kind of equalizer between the parties if they have some kind of financial disparity and the court needs a certain thing to help the child, and the court needs to order one of those parents to pay a majority or all of that, whatever that happens to be. So going into the difference between expert witnesses, ordinary expert witnesses, and custody evaluators is really where the meat of this video is going to be. Just like any other expert, the custody evaluator is going to get on the stand and they're going to provide testimony to the court. And just like any other expert, that testimony can include their opinions, which ordinary lay witnesses can't go into. An expert can. The expert can give their opinion to the court if that opinion is in their field of expertise, and if they have provided a foundation as to what their expertise is and why they're experts in that field. So usually it's like their degrees and all of that, but there could be more behind it than that. The custody evaluators can do all of that and more. The first thing that the custody evaluators can do is they can give a recommendation to the court. So after they provide all of their testimony and they go into their opinions and why their opinions are what they are, they can say that they recommend a parent in particular get this custodial designation and the other parent get this custodial designation. I'm not going to talk about beating those recommendations in this video because I did a separate video on beating recommendations. So if you want to get more into the nitty-gritty of beating an expert's recommendations in this situation, or in this case a custody evaluator, please watch that video instead. The second thing that custody evaluators can do is they can be sort of, I don't want to use the word Trojan horse, but that's the word that I see used a lot in appeals. They can be sort of a Trojan horse for evidence that might not ordinarily be admissible. I covered one example in the video, secretly recording your ex, where it came up on appeal that a parent was secretly recording their ex, and they provided the recording to the custody evaluator, and the custody evaluator based their opinions and their recommendation on that recording, even though the other side said that it was an illegal recording because it was a secret recording and they didn't have their consent to record them and all of that. I'm not going to go into the details here either because I have that in a separate video. Another example is hearsay testimony. The custody evaluator can go out and talk to teachers and police officers and doctors, and based upon what they're being told by these other people, they can fashion their opinions on, or sorry, fashion their report, because they enter a custody evaluation, an actual like multi-page report. They can fashion a report based on what they've heard, and they can also from there base their opinions and ultimately the recommendation on what these other people have told them. And in a big way, that's a Trojan horse for hearsay evidence to get into the court. I hate using that word because I don't want this video to be negative, because I haven't had a personal experience with a custody evaluator, and I don't just get negative stories from people. I do get a lot of negative stories from people who've had custody evaluators, but I get some good stories too, and I get a lot of neutral stories too, where people say, you know, that wasn't a worst experience in the world, but they also found a lot of important things, and a lot of those stories where it's kind of a half and half, half good, half bad type of thing. So I'm sorry if it makes it seem like it's a negative video, but it's really one of those things that it depends a lot on the quality of the custody evaluator that you get, and it also depends a lot on the state that you're in, because different states may have different, I don't want to say quality of experts so much as a different quality of educating the experts, or maybe a different quality of certifying the experts, a different quality of a different level of detail that they go into before they allow people to become custody evaluators. So anyway, kind of a tangent there. The last thing I wanted to mention is that custody evaluators have the power to look into your paperwork. So ordinarily, if your opponent wants to see like your bank records or like medical records or something like that, your opponent has to file like a subpoena, and then you have the right to object to the subpoena and try to quash it and all of that. Well, with custody evaluators, it's a little murky. The custody evaluator will have you sign documentation that gives them the right to look into all of your finances and whatever other private or confidential data that you have. And I'm not sure how attorneys or even non-attorneys go about challenging those requests, or if it's even possible. It may be that once a custody evaluator is on the case, you're subjected to the evaluation regardless of whether or not you don't agree with what they want to look at. So that's the real big thing. That's the third thing, is that they can say, send me the last 2 years of bank statements, send me your tax information. They could say something like, send me your mental health diagnoses and documents and stuff like that. So 3 big things to look out for, not necessarily negative, just things to look out for, just to be aware of when a custody evaluator gets put on your case and gets empowered by the judge. Before I go, one of the main things that I've looked at that jumped out at me is a lot of advice that says, if you can avoid it, don't get a custody evaluator. That's what most of the advice is saying, and from what I've looked into, it does seem to make sense, at least to me, because of my perspective, which is talked about a lot in my video, Evaluating Mental Health, is that when you involve experts, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. You don't necessarily know what the opinion of the expert's going to be, and you're going to pay a lot of money for it, and you're going to spend a lot of time and effort into whatever is involved in the process that that expert needs to go through. And ultimately, that's a lot of work for something that you have no idea as to how it's going to go. As I talk about in the video Evaluating Mental Health, if you have an ex with problems that's committing abuse and neglect, you should be able to go about proving the abuse and neglect yourself. Some people will say that they just can't because their ex is too sneaky and all that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that if a custody evaluator is appointed that your ex is going to suddenly stop being sneaky and just admit to all these problems. If they're deceiving you and other people, they're going to go about at least trying to deceive the custody evaluator as well. So from what I've seen, and again, I don't try and make this negative, it's mainly from the perspective of a person who was in a child custody dispute with very little money as it was, and it just being one of those things that was going to be yet another thing that my ex could potentially exploit, and also would cost me a whole bunch of money that I just didn't have at the time. So a lot of people on this channel are here representing themselves because they don't have enough money to even get an attorney. So the idea of a custody evaluator is just one more thing to pay for, and just one more thing to add stress to the situation. And like I mentioned in the video evaluating mental health, when you get these experts involved, ultimately at the end of the road, they may not agree with you anyway. And a lot of times decisions like that, not just from experts, but even from like the police, like if they choose not to arrest, or even like CPS, like if they say that allegations are substantiated, a lot of times these outcomes end up getting used against you later on anyway. So later on, after the fact, you may feel that you have enough evidence to prove abuse and neglect on your own, and you go to court, and then the first thing that your opponent says is, well, that custody evaluator that was appointed last year said everything was fine. So, or, you know, that police officer decided not to arrest me and take me to jail. Or that CPS agent said that the allegations were unsubstantiated. So a lot of times, even after all that work and all that money, it's not enough that you didn't get the outcome you wanted from whatever person was providing input to the court. But now your opponent takes it and uses it against you as a shield to defend against whatever subsequent thing that you found that you actually feel you do have the ability to prove to the court on your own. So I hope that this video wasn't confusing for people. Not as much concrete, specific things as I went through with parenting coordinators, but still, I think it's important for people to know those 3 big things to look into, because I think the biggest thing that people are upset about when it comes to custody evaluators is they just don't know to what extent they're going to have control over the case, and to what extent they can probe into your life and your ex's life. So I guess with that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. I really hope that I get a lot of feedback on this one, just because I didn't personally have an experience with custody evaluators. But definitely post something in the comments below if you feel strongly about your experience with custody evaluators, especially if you noticed anything that is a talking point in connection with something I went over with in this video. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and see you guys next time.